Okay, I wanted to make this video for a specific subject that a lot of targeted individuals deal with when they are dealing with this program. This is known as smear. This is the smear campaign that plays a part in it. One of the things I've noticed from my own targeting experience is that the perpetrators never ever ask whether whatever it is that's being said or being shown or being displayed about any of us is either true or not. They just basically take whatever they're shown by the third party and they just go with it. But if you look at this from like a fair standard point, people, both sides would have or should be able to at least be able to, showcase their evidence and basically showcase proof of, one side should be able to prove their innocence as well as the other side is basically making accusations, right? But they don't do this. They basically want people to just go with whatever information or whatever stuff that they're showing them and just accept that as facts. However, photorealism and Photoshop is a thing, and there are people who are extremely talented in this stuff. And some evidence that does get displayed is is displayed to the point, it's displayed to a point to where it's very questionable. Is very questionable to how it's made, right? And some things look too good to be, the old saying, some things are just way too good to be true. Then this is the same situations with a lot of stuff. Now you got to understand there's corruption within a lot of factions of government, within a lot of factions of laws and law enforcement, all types of locations. It's not to say that there aren't any good people in these areas. There are people who do just, do their job because they want it. They're basically in the mindset that they're doing what's best for the country and what's best for the people, but they don't realize that they're being used. A lot of this basically comes right down to compartmentalization. Now, when it comes to your average perps, this can range from three to probably even more categories. The typical one is people who are already aware of what they're doing from the start, and some of them who have even, this ranges for several different types of people. There are some who've been born to do this stuff, and there's some people who have just been brought in. It just depends on the person and what factors are in place. And then you got some people who are basically taken advantage of and basically are forced into doing the dirty work for this system. And then, of course, you got people who just do this as as business or whatever. They just do it to make a quick buck or whatever. But either way, a lot of people are getting exploited no matter how you look at it. Now, even if whatever accusations are being said are true, let's look at the statistics of this technology and the fact that it has the capabilities of behavioral modification. Keep that in mind, behavioral modification. We've had a number of massive amounts of public shootouts that have happened over the couple of years, including this year alone. Now, when you look at a situation like that, what would compel somebody to basically go out and do such a thing, to commit such an atrocity, right? What would compel a person to do that? What could possibly happen to motivate a person to commit such an act? Well, if you've seen a lot of these videos from a lot of these YouTube channels from some of these other TIs who've basically publicized their own targeting experience, I'm talking about the stuff that really expose what's going on. It's too obvious to ignore, and they can't deflect from any of it because it's pretty obvious that one person's showing a negative interest towards another. So when you look at that situation and you multiply that, the amount of times that it occurred throughout the day, and you got to understand this happens on a daily basis. We don't ever get a break from this. It's a constant thing. And the sad part about this is all of these unnecessary deaths, all of these shootouts that go down, they don't have to happen. None of this stuff has to happen. Nobody has to be hurt. I'm not advocating violence, by the way, and I'm not advocating a scapegoat tactic for actual criminals to basically get away with anything like that, because I am aware that it's possible that some people who just willingly do this shit could very well try to seek to use use an excuse like that to try to just get out of what they did. But at the same time, even with that being the case, here's another key factor: geoengineering. that's something that everybody is being exposed to. Everybody throughout the neighborhood, no matter who perped you, they're still breathing the same oxygen that you're breathing. And it's been hinted or said and even mentioned in some documentaries, some speeches, even some stuff that whistleblowers said that these perpetrators also actually lace themselves with these chemical compounds, the nanoparticles that is, in order to enhance, to either dull their senses or enhance certain functions so that they don't have to feel bad about what they're doing, and it can also enhance their capabilities so that they can actually perform their task a lot easier. Problem is, nanobots are a machine, right? You can hack into a machine, you can hack into a device, you can do that stuff. And whoever the hacker is basically manipulating that stuff basically from a different location, right? It could even be from outside of a building. It could be from even down the street. Any of these things can happen. Keep in mind when you see that's a device that's basically being manipulated by someone from a distance. The owner of the device didn't consent to any of that. They didn't. So let's look at this other situation with technology and the other capabilities of hypnosis. And let's say someone gets hypnotized by this technology, right? And they go through just about all the necessary steps in order to achieve a state of hypnosis. Is the actions of what the person has committed during the stages of when they were induced with hypnosis, are they really the culprit here? Are they really the ones to blame for these things that have occurred? Or are you going to blame the person who basically subjected that person to hypnosis? Because think about it. You can take out the person who committed the act, but what's going to stop the person who actually induced the hypnosis to do it to somebody else? It's not going to stop. It's just, unless you deal with the problem at its source, this issue will never be solved. It will never be taken care of because people are going about it the wrong way. And this has been a constant thing that has allowed a lot of these real criminals to get away with this organized crime. And that's exactly what it is. It is an organized crime that is being done on the population, not just here, but just about all around the globe you can possibly think of, in multiple countries. There's people going through this mess. There's people basically out there crying out for help, a lot of people who are suffering at the hands of a lot of this bullshit that basically is just being brought before them into their lives uninvited. Nobody consented to any of this, and nobody wanted any part of any of this. And don't get this in your head thinking that just because certain people are whistleblowers that's the prime excuse of why they get targeted. No, that is not the case. It's not the fact that not just people going against the system, people speaking out, people doing the right thing. That ain't it. Some people who have never done anything, any of these, basically done none of these things, and they found themselves in a position of being targeted. What I've come to the understanding of is that these perpetrators want to use a lot of TIs as advertisement to basically say, like, if you basically don't fall in line with what they want and their demands, and what their whole purpose is, right, of what they're trying to fight for, then you'll be subjugated into, becoming a TI yourself. But the thing is, you need to really think about that. They have targeted people who have not done anything to them, and it was off pure interest. How can you guarantee the safety of yourself and your family and your loved ones from such a system, from such an out of control system like that? And the truth is, you can't. And trying to give them what they want is just going to make it worse, because what you're doing when you basically are aiding an organization like that, you are basically fixing the situation to where you are going to lose the ability you're taking a chance of losing the ability permanently to ever have the chance of fighting against this system. Giving them the power, giving them the capability, giving them, allowing them to get away with what they're doing, not speaking up, not speaking out. And don't get me wrong, I get it. A lot of people are concerned about their families and loved ones, and they don't want them to be caught in the crosshairs. But look at what's happening now. Look at the amount of the corruption that's going on now. How they're trying to implement a lot of these mandates, a lot of the jabs and all this other stuff on people. That didn't stop, that didn't stop them from trying to induce this to everybody, right? And that's what they're still pushing for. The system is still doing something that seeks to affect everybody at every age. There's even a lot of unconstitutional things that are even going on behind the scenes. There's distract, deflect, and then they got stuff that's basically trying to get people who are not even at the proper age, to really assess an important decision because they're not old enough to think for themselves yet. They're only still learning. I didn't even want to bring my own into this world because I knew the system couldn't be trusted. Not that I'm against finding a relationship partner, but that's, even that on its own is a possible miracle right there. Because I mean, look, whether you look left or right, you're surrounded by perps almost every single day. And it's just, it makes things complicated, However, I believe a lot of us can agree, we've been betrayed by family, friends, co-workers, all types of individuals you can possibly think of. However, we are not alone in this. There are others who have spoken up. There are others who have fought. There are others who basically put their foot down and refuse to submit to this out of control system. I tell you, the amount of lies that get thrashed around, and a lot of the scripted language that gets thrashed around, the only thing that comes to mind is this.
Lies. Oh, lies!
Its final lesson is carved deep in my psyche, that this world and all its people are diseased. Free will is a myth. Religion is a joke. It's controlled by something greater. Memes. The DNA of the soul. The shit I live. They are the culture. They are everything we pass on. Expose someone to anger long enough, they learn to hate. They become a carrier. Envy, greed, despair. Only leads all lasting.
What do you think about what Monsoon said earlier about memes? You think we're all doomed to follow some coded-in routine? That there's no free will?
Well, you're always going to have restraints based on what culture you're born into. The concept of memes was first proposed by Richard Dawkins in a book called The Selfish Gene. Dawkins, a biologist, stated that even if the actions of a living thing appear to be altruistic, each of its genes is still engaging in selfish behavior, purely as a matter of survival.
Yeah, I heard about that.
He went on to define memes as a different kind of self-replicating unit. They're the genes of a culture, from fashion to chord progressions in music, even political expression. And just like normal genes, they replicate. They grow, infecting more and more people.
You buy a shirt you like and put it on. Other people see you wearing it, then buy it for themselves.
Yeah, the genes of a culture makes it all sound pretty lofty. But the way Dawkins puts it, memes can also transmit worthless things, even the bad parts of a culture. Fashion's one thing, but value-related memes can put huge restraints on people's lives. For example, the idea that having lots of money is the ultimate goal, the thing we should all strive for.
Like in the US.
Any capitalist country, really. But anyway, you catch this money worship meme, then not only are you trying to get rich, you're also spreading that idea to other people. You have to. If that meme isn't the cultural norm, then what are you working for?
So you start spreading the word about how important it is to succeed, earn status.
Right. And the really contagious memes can be even worse. For example, revenge. A guy sees his countrymen killed by terrorism, so he becomes a terrorist and retaliates. It's an infinite loop.
I think it's the same thing with child soldiers. Kids' parents are killed by other kids, so they join the war next and start killing other people's parents. There's gotta be a way to break the cycle, though.
Dawkins wrote about that, too. How we can rebel against our genes and memes. Once you're aware of your own memes, you can train yourself to identify and replicate the good ones.
And kill the bad ones.
Right.
Some of you probably have heard the old saying, he who controls the past, or he who controls history basically controls the world. In this case, well, he who controls the narrative controls the people. Who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. By Geo Orwell, 1984. When future historians write about the 20th century, it would not surprise me to find it had been nicknamed the century of spin. Today, more than ever, we see that the battle for the minds of the people revolves around the manner in which events get interpreted, not necessarily the events themselves. Social observers have long noted this trafficking in interpretations. Who decides what is good and what is bad? Who decides who the good guys and the bad guys are in this battle for control of the narrative? We live in a metadated world. Before entering World War I, very few Americans knew much about Germany, its history, and its aims. But as the drums of war began to sound, there were plenty of messages being piped into our brains through the news media, striving to form a national will to take up, or a national will to take up arms against Kaiser Bill and those German brutes. But who were these brutes, really? Stories of German aggression were circulated as if Otto Bismarck and later Kaiser William were out to take over the world. In point of the fact, history didn't bear this out at all. It was the British Empire that had a 300-year hold on the world, famously declaring with pride, "The sun never sets on the British Empire." If one were to look at the country previously to that first Great War to see what countries were the most aggressive, one might be surprised at what the facts revealed. Great Britain had been in 10 wars, Russia 7, France 5. Among the least warlike of the European powers had been Austria 3 and Germany only 3. What's more, under Bismarck and Kaiser, Germany never engaged in a single armed conflict. When a German U-boat blew up the Louis, I cannot pronounce that word, so let's continue. It was not a surprise attack on innocent victims. According to the Encyclopedia Britannica, the ship was carrying, in addition to passengers, a cargo of 173 tons of rifle ammunition and shells. For this reason, the Germans, who had circulated warnings that the ship would be sunk, felt themselves fully justified in attacking a vessel that was furthering the war aims of their enemy. The spin was in. The America had the justifications it was looking for to enter the war. Before I continue with this, everybody remember that 9/11 was a premeditated, was basically a pre-scripted scenario that basically brought out. For some of you who have already looked into that, you should already know. Once again, even beside that, you got to keep in mind, there was a video that was created not too long ago, which I will play at the end of this, of several news broadcast stations having the exact same message. So how can you trust any type of news outlet that basically is giving you the same type of information word for word as if it's from a script? You got to be very careful what type of information you're basically are going by, because there's a lot of propaganda and there's a lot of lies out there, quite a lot, and it's being used to basically manipulate quite a lot of us. Thus was born the Committee on Public Information, CPI, whose aim was to influence U.S. public opinion to support the war effort. Wilson's Executive Order 2594 set in motion an ever-broadening series of events. This anti-German sentiment had serious consequences. Hatred was aroused toward German American citizens, and being anti-German became a way of showing patriotism for the American war effort. Number one, even though there were more immigrants from Germany than from any other country, of course, this is kind of sounding a little bit too close to Project Paperclip, but let's continue. Even though there were more immigrants from Germany than from any other country, many libraries pulled books off the shelves that might be considered pro German. Laws were passed specifically hostile to German Americans. The climate became so hostile that by 1918, South Dakota prohibited the use of German over the telephone and in public assemblies of three or more persons. By the early 1920s, 34 states had passed English only requirements in their schools. These laws were argued before the Supreme Court in the case of Meyer v. Nebraska. Two years ago, I remember reading about German Americans having their disjunts murdered by hostile neighbors. These actions were generated by the propaganda machinery of our government. Hand in glove with the powerful newspaper media network, this anti-German sentiment came directly from the Wilson White House. He'd formerly been president of Princeton, an idealist and educated fool, which he'd soon have ample opportunity to prove before the end of his second term. In the late 1920s, Edward Barnes wrote a book about the essential role that propaganda plays in helping shape the attitudes of the body politic. The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits of the masses is an important element in democracy, in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. Propaganda, see 1928. Propaganda was considered a good thing when the good guys were using it. When Barney's book was written, the liberal elite liked the idea of controlling the masses without having to resort to guns. Public education was utilized for the same purpose, which, of course, for those of you who are not aware, I would not trust any of the public schools, especially now, considering what's all that's going down right now. Without having to resort to guns, public education was utilized for the same purpose. At that time, social engineering was having a field day with other techniques for reshaping the masses, including forced sterilizations, which, of course, you probably have already seen go on out since the past 3 years at this moment. A lot more push for it, actually, than before, really. Lobbyists for the eugenics movement succeeded in legalizing forced sterilizations in more than 30 states. Barnes went on to say, "We are governed, our minds molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. It is they who pull the wires which control the public mind, who harness old social forces and contrive new ways to blind and guide the world." Walter Lippmann, in his book Public Opinion, which deals with these same matters, wrote, "We are told about the world before we see it. We imagine most things before we experience them. And those preconceptions, unless education has made us accurately aware, govern deeply the whole process of perception." It was the propaganda machinery of Goebbels and Nazis that gave propaganda a bad name, as Hitler's minister of propaganda, who famously asserted, "If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it." After the war, a kinder, gentle term would be adopted: public relations. Every politician has a PR team actively shaping their message and feeding their sound bites to the media directly and through thinly veiled, independently written letters to the editor. Edward Bernier used his book as a stepping stone to advise his own career as a publicist. He ultimately achieved the stature he desired, becoming a mouthpiece for Big Tobacco for a spell, as well as for General Electric, and that is actually not the first time I've heard that word, in what amounted to helping it achieve a stranglehold on American electric power in the largest peacetime propaganda drive in peacetime history, M.C. Miller. His crowning achievement was the work he did in Latin America during the 1950s on behalf of the United Fruit Company, UFC, whereby he paved the way for the CIA overthrow of the democratically elected government of Jacob Arbenz. To our shame as a nation, we did not dig into the motivations of UFC or the underlying truths behind that what was really going on there in Guatemala or Costa Rica. The resulting damage to U.S. credibility in the region lingered for decades. In 1962, French thinker, theologian, and social critic Jacques Ellul wrote a book titled Propaganda, The Formation of Men's Attitudes in It. And he writes, propaganda does not aim to elevate man, but to make him serve. Ellul's book addressed the issue of modern life, our relationship to the state, was one of his reoccurring themes, which is why it became important for him to write a book about propaganda. It is a central feature of contemporary life. In 1973, Italian novelist, philosopher Umberto Eco wrote, not long ago, if you wanted to seize political power in a country, you had merely to control the army and the police. Today is only in the most backward countries that fascist generals in carrying out a coup d'etat still use tanks. If a country has reached a high enough degree of industrialization, the whole scene changes. The day after the fall of Khrushchev, the editors of Pravda, Izvestia, the heads of the radio and televisions were replaced. The army wasn't called out. Today, a country belongs to the person who controls the communications. On this topic, much more can be said. The aim here is not to say all, but to open the door a crack that we might see how our current national, I cannot pronounce that, fits into the broader history that preceded it. All around us, we have warning culture forces at odds with one another. If one day there comes a time to choose sides, it's better to have worked at becoming informed than to later make excuses for having buried our heads in the sand. In other words, it's not your fault that you've been programmed, but it is our responsibility to basically unprogram ourselves during these times. We need to basically be able to fight for those who are not able to fight for themselves, those who are still way too young to understand the corruption in this world, as well as those who are basically too old to basically fight on as much as they used to in their earlier days. You could very well say that this is truly World War III, but it's not in the ways of which the old wars were fought. There's some related links down at the bottom here, and then that's basically the end of the article. I'm not going to read any more if there is. Judging from the looks of this, it's just a few things that they're basically showing. Oh, that's actually interesting to read. Two quick book reviews of Revere of Doubt and Literature, book of Brooklyn. Whatever we read from intense curiosity gives us a model of how we should always read or understand the art of thinking. And then, of course, and then at the bottom it says, simultaneously quarantine season this spring here in the autumn of my life as my thoughts turn once more to getting rid of things. The spring cleaning, I was out in my garage sorting through my books. There is order to fill another box for Goodwill if you or someone. I guess this is just suggestions. That's a lot of books, though. I'm going to leave a link to this article in the description. You can read it at your own discretion. As always, I hope all is going well, minus targeting. Stay safe out there, everybody, and stay strong.